Forest rangers, what are your unexplainable and downright creepy stories? This is gonna get buried as I'm late to the party, but I worked for a few months as a park ranger with the Florida Forest Service at my local state forest. The creepiest thing I saw was a poor young man who hung himself on my second week on the job. The unexplainable, though, are obviously not as cut and dry. We'd have children's clothes neatly folded and left on the trails, pairs of shoes in the middle of our dense burned blocks, and just a general sense of eeriness. My first few weeks on the job I was easily spooked, but after I got into my groove of spending hours alone in the woods, it took a lot to shake me. When the forest goes silent, pack up and move along. To be clear, I am not forestry, I just have a related story. My cousin is with the Forest Service in the Montana/Wyoming area, and I decided to go up there with her to literally test the waters. She does hydrology and has to ride out to the middle of nowhere to test streams and snow runoff to ensure no contaminants, so I thought that sounded fun and wanted to do a bit of a tour with her. We were going to have to camp out there for 2 nights, so we packed up all our gear in saddlebags or saddle bundles and started out. The first day and night was amazing. Beautiful scenery and amazing air quality. It really is so peaceful out there. I love that area and wish I got to go up there more often. Anyway, we started out on the second day and my cousin said, "You want to see something weird?" Of course I said yes, so she led me on a bit of a side journey into this tiny little ravine. We ended up traveling about 2 hours away from our actual path we had laid out. At the very end of this fold in the land, she dismounts and tells me to get off my horse, too. We tie them up in this gorgeous little clearing and she tells me to follow this tiny wildlife path and bring our little rechargeable radio. It is one of those you can plug in or wind up, and it also acts as a lantern if you really need it to, but that kills the batteries quickly. I do, and, out in the middle of ducking nowhere, there is a huge coil of wire sticking out of the ground. The wire itself was not weirdly large, like some buried transmission wire, but small, like 10 or 12 gauge wiring for a house. It trailed off into the brush and trees, so naturally I decided to follow the damn thing out of curiosity. My cousin trails behind me as I do, and this wire, after coming straight up from the ground, is strung across limbs of trees then back to the ground, then it snakes around rocks and finally dead ends into an outlet. That outlet is mounted on the side of a desk. It looks like a schoolteacher's desk from when I was growing up, with a metal base and a pseudo wood/plastic top thing. No chair, no building, no nothing, just this outlet and this desk. I am staring confused as all hell at this desk in the middle of a forest when my cousin takes the radio, pulls out the cord, and plugs it into the outlet. That duct then lit up and started blaring static. The wire was being fed from somewhere. Now, the place where we were had no road access, no buildings for many miles, and no other people around. And yet, there was a live outlet. Weird as poop. No spooky jump scares or bodies, just one, lone powered desk in the middle of the woods. I wish I had taken a picture of it. I'm a ranger, non-peace officer, and work at a pretty remote desert park. This happened before I got there, but the other rangers I work with were there. They went to do a patrol during summer, our off-season, at one of our seldom used campgrounds. On a patrol, our maintenance ranger found a burned-out car in one of the sites. The desert is a weird place, so he just calls the sheriff and waits. Sheriff arrives and it turns out there's a body in the driver's seat. With no arms and no legs. Just a torso and head. Burned. Sheriff's just marked it as a suicide and removed the vehicle. We are close to Mexico and get a lot of illegal drug traffic. So I guess they don't even bother trying to solve those. Super sketchy. I was the lone recreation ranger in a small district in southern Idaho. Nearest town from guard station was about 1.5 hours away by car. After moving into the guard station, solar power was not working, and I hadn't slept for about a month due to various factors: bats in the cabin, something walking on the deck at night. The woods there always had an eerie feeling to them, unlike the southwest ponderosa forest that I was used to. About 2 months into the seasonal job, I started to hear something walking and scratching on the deck at night, perhaps even on the door. Now this district was known for its badgers and beavers, so I didn't think much of it. When leaving the cabin at night, I always had an eerie feeling like I was being watched. One night, I was returning from my grocery run, always went on Tuesday nights, and I had a bad feeling. At the time, I did not have my shotgun in the vehicle. After stepping out of the vehicle, I looked to the right of the cabin, about 50 feet from my front door. All I could see were 2 eyes about 3.5 to 4 feet in the air. To say I freaked out was an understatement. I started yelling, "Get the duck out of here," but the eyes only crouched down, and inched closer. At this point I could tell it was a large animal of some kind, definitely not a coyote. I tossed a piece of firewood in the general area and the creature leapt back a bit but did not make a sound. Tossed 4 or 5 more pieces and creature still inched forward. At this point I fumbled with the keys. Of course the ducking solar power was out again. I managed to get inside and grabbed my shotgun. Technically, you are not supposed to have guns in gov housing, but who the duck lives in the hills have eyes backcountry and does not carry. Went outside, creature was bit closer. Still could not get a good look with my crappy headlamp. Loaded shotgun and continued to throw pieces of wood with one hand. Finally the creature walked back into the brush. That night, I drank about 4 uppies and slept with my shotgun. In the morning, trail crew came up and we found mountain lion tracks all over the porch, rocking bench, and compound leading back to the creek. After that event, I always heard the rocking chair move and someone or something walking on the porch, but never found any tracks after that point. Considering that it was always muddy up there, it was weird to not find any tracks. I've been stalked by mountain lions before and never had that eerie feeling like I did in those woods. Not a ranger, but I used to be in a group that's somewhat like the Scouts, so we spent a lot of time in the woods and some weird crap happened often, but most of the time it was easy to explain. One thing happened though, that to this day scares the living crap out of me. I was a leader for the age group 8 to 10 years old, and we were out on a camping trip. It was the first year we stayed on that terrain and it was huge. Normally we tend to explore the majority of a terrain before the kids arrive, so we were aware of any possible dangerous spots to avoid. This time it was impossible. Every camp we have what we call a night game. It's usually a scary game in which the kids have to complete several tasks while the leaders scare the ever-loving crap out of them. Obviously we had one too during that camp. We masked up as monsters and hid out in the woods close to the checkpoints they had to pass. While running in between checkpoints I found an open stretch of forest with little to no foliage, so it was ideal for chasing after them. There was no real room to hide besides behind trees, so I couldn't use my flashlight or they'd be able to see me from miles away. It was dark, like the unsettling kind of dark that plays tricks on your eyes and you start imagining things that aren't real. During my stay there I saw a shadow that was around my size running past me a few times. I couldn't see it very well, so I just assumed I was imagining things because nothing was there when I turned my flashlight on. The game was nearing its end and I saw the shadow again. This time I could see it vaguely standing near a tree not too far away from me. I thought it was one of the other leaders hiding to scare kids and decided to go over there as it was about time to go back. I aimed my flashlight towards the tree and while getting closer I noticed that there was indeed someone standing there dressed in what looked like a torn burlap sack and had their head covered with a few white plastic bags that looked like they were tied together. I started to feel pure dread. Something felt really off. I asked if everything was okay but they didn't respond. The only thing I heard was this weird sound that sounded like someone knocking on wood. Nevertheless I went a bit closer until I was about 10 meters away from this person. The knocking sound turned out to be that person smacking his head repeatedly into the tree, and I noticed he looked like a male. He was barefoot and his arms and legs were covered with crusted mud. His hands were in a weird cramped position. I was convinced this was just one of the other leaders pulling a prank, so I told them to knock it off. He slowly turned his head and started walking towards me. Something inside me just told me to run. It didn't matter if it was just a stupid prank, and I ran away scared for nothing. If this wasn't a prank it felt like I was in serious danger, so I ran as fast as I could. I heard him running after me, but I didn't want to turn around to look as I'd probably run into a tree. I arrived back at the campsite and every single person that could be dressed like that was already there. They couldn't have gotten there before me, and if they did they sure as hell didn't have the time to change into their regular clothes. Still, I told them and that they gave me a good scare with that. They just looked weird at me, thinking I was trying to scare them, and we left it at that. Next day I wanted to go check it out. Who knows, maybe some weirdo ate the wrong mushroom and might be out there dying from hypothermia. I took someone else with me just in case, and there was nothing but endless trees. We arrived at the tree where I saw the person banging his head, and there was a dead, skinned, decomposing rabbit nailed to the tree. We called the cops. They looked around quickly and brushed it off as just a prank from another scouting group or some kids from the nearby town and left it at that. We didn't notice anything weird after that, so it probably was a dumb prank. But seriously, some people have a ducked-up sense of humor. Edit. This has had a lot more responses than I thought. To clarify, I'm 99% sure it was a prank by locals. The cops reacted in a way that looked more like not this ducking bullpoop again than oh no, evil murderer in the woods and we won't stop it. Ex-Ranger here. We had a group of frat boys making way too much noise. We came by twice, and at the second stop, I told them, "This is your last warning." Not only is it rude for other campers to be so loud, it's exceptionally dangerous. Everyone knows that the local mountain lions are attracted to loud noises at night, and these ghost cats, as they are called, can creep right up on you without you hearing or seeing them. Whatever you do, don't leave your tent tonight. If you hear anything, don't make a sound. We went back to the station, grabbed the lion pelt from the interp center and the night vision goggles. Head ranger had to blow what was left of the budget at the end of the previous year. Once they were all in their tents, we crept into the campsite and made fake lion tracks everywhere. We set up the lion pelt propped up over some sticks. The other ranger got out the PA and from a distance started doing fake lion calls, slowing, getting closer. I pulled the Jeep forward like we were arriving on scene, and got out. Turned on my mag light and illuminated the silhouette of the lion pelt. Because I was moving quickly, the shadow of the lion appeared to me moving. At this point the frat boys were losing it. Jim, the other ranger, shouted, "Stay in your tents," followed shortly by "She's coming around at us," and then there's another one. And finally, "Let's get the duck out of here." At that point, we turned off the flashlights, grabbed the lion pelt in the darkness and jumped in the Jeep and sped off. Just after sunrise they started peeking out of the tents. Nobody was brave enough to get out until about 8:30. When they saw all the huge paw and claw prints everywhere they really freaked out. Your tax dollar at work.